Beneath the ground of a modern village near Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists have uncovered something that nobody expected.
There is a secret hiding in the dirt of Turkey that is finally being revealed. Sayburç is the name of the place, and it is older and weirder than anything else found in the region. Most people do not realize that the carvings here show a story that is 5,000 years ahead of its time. It is a mystery that has been buried for 9,000 years, and the truth is actually worse than anyone imagined. The evidence shows a settled community with advanced art and social rules that experts thought were impossible for nomadic hunter-gatherers. Real people in the Stone Age. A massive secret is coming out of the ground in southeastern Turkey, and it is making the world look at the start of human society in a whole new way. Just 35 miles away from the legendary site of Göbekli Tepe sits a place called Sayburç. This site dates back to 9,000 years before the Common Era, which is a time when humans were supposed to be simple hunters moving from place to place. But Sayburç is different. It features stone benches carved right into the solid rock and the oldest known story panel in human history. This carving shows a line of people with leopards and a bull, and it is carved with a level of detail that should not have existed for another 4,000 years. For a long time, researchers thought Sayburç was just another small part of the Göbekli Tepe network. They assumed it was part of the same big change where humans started farming and building cities. But what makes Sayburç truly weird and hard to explain is the art. The carvings show human figures with real body parts and a storytelling style that is way too advanced. The way the buildings are laid out also follows completely different rules from Göbekli Tepe, even though they were built at the exact same time. Most importantly, the site shows that people were living there permanently. There are houses, places for fire, stones for grinding grain, and pits for storing food. This directly goes against the idea that Göbekli Tepe was just a temple where people met for rituals but did not live. New studies from 25 have finally revealed the biggest secret of this place. The truth is that Sayburç was a settled community with advanced art and complex social rules. This was supposed to be impossible for 9,000 years before the Common Era. The most shocking discovery is that the differences between these two sites are not just small changes. They represent two totally different cultures living at the same time in the same area. This suggests that the ancient world was much more diverse and skilled than our simple history models allow. Sayburç sits in the Şanlıurfa province, which is part of the Fertile Crescent, where farming supposedly started 10,000 years before the Common Era. The site was found in 21 during a big survey of the area. Excavations between 21 and 23 revealed stone structures and benches carved right into the limestone. The most amazing part is a relief panel carved into a natural rock face that shows a story with several people and animals. The relief is about 11.5 feet long and nearly 5 feet high. It shows a planned scene with a central human figure holding a ceremonial object. This person is surrounded by 2 leopards and a bull with clear horns. There are other human figures at different sizes, which creates a story that shows how they all relate to each other. This is huge for 9,000 years before the Common Era. During this time, most art around the world was just simple shapes or symbols. But the figures at Sayburç look like real people. They have arms, legs, and bodies with the right sizes. Their heads are shown from the side with real features. This is representational art, not just abstract symbols. It is the kind of thing that makes people stop and realize that history is much older and deeper than we thought. The site is a puzzle that shows humans were already telling complex stories and building permanent homes at the very start of the Stone Age. It is a detail that changes the core of everything we know about how we became civilized. The leopards have exaggerated male parts, which might have meant something about power or nature to the people who carved them. The central figure seems to be the focus of a very specific event. Maybe it was a dance, a hunt, or a legend they all knew. The bull is shown from the side with its horns standing out, looking powerful and strong. This level of detail means the artist spent a long time watching these animals and humans to get their shapes right. For starters, the limestone used for these carvings is not easy to work with. You need sharp tools, and a lot of patience to make a scene this big and complex. It has been missing for years, but this key detail can shock the way we think about ancient minds. These people were not just trying to survive, they were trying to remember. They wanted to leave a mark that would last forever. They carved their stories into the very earth they lived on. What most people do not realize is that this panel is not just a decoration. It is a window into the brain of a person from 11,000 years ago. That brain was just as smart and creative as ours today. Things get even crazier when you look at how the site was actually used for daily life. It was not just a place for art, it was a place for sleeping, eating, and growing up. The carved benches show that people sat together, perhaps sharing the very stories seen on the walls. This creates a picture of a tight-knit group of people who valued their history and their community. The site was identified during a survey that was looking for more places like Göbekli Tepe, but it found something that actually challenges it. While Göbekli Tepe is tucked away on a hill, Sayburç is in a place that makes more sense for a village. It has access to resources and a layout that suggests it was meant for long-term stay. The figures in the relief are not just standing there, they are in motion. One figure seems to be walking, and another is holding that rattle-like object high in the air. This suggests action and sequential events, which is the definition of a narrative. It is like a comic strip from the Stone Age. This kind of art shows up much later in places like Egypt or Sumer, so finding it here is a total surprise. Every time an archaeologist scrapes away more dirt, they find a new reason to be amazed. The Sanliurfa region is full of these hidden gems, but Sayburç is hands down one of the most important. It tells a human story that was lost to time. The bull, the leopards, and the humans are all tied together in a scene that probably meant the world to them. Now, it means a new start for our understanding of history. Basically, we are looking at the birth of human storytelling. The carvings at this site hint at a much deeper mystery than just simple decorations. Still, the true shock comes when comparing this village to the massive stone circles nearby. Two cultures, one region. When looking at Sayburç next to Göbekli Tepe, the differences in building and art are truly shocking. Göbekli Tepe is famous for its giant T-shaped stone pillars that weigh up to 20 tons. These pillars are decorated with carvings of animals like snakes, foxes, and scorpions. But there is one big thing missing from Göbekli Tepe: realistic people. The pillars there might represent people in a very abstract way, with the top being a head and the bottom being a body, but they are just geometric shapes. When human body parts do show up at Göbekli Tepe, they are just hands or arms carved onto the side of a pillar. They are never complete people. Sayburç is the exact opposite. It focuses on the human form with incredible skill. The 25 architectural study shows that the design rules were totally different. Göbekli Tepe has round buildings with pillars in circles, which is a pattern that stayed the same for hundreds of years. Sayburç has rectangular buildings built against the rock with benches carved into the floor. These are permanent features meant for people to sit on every day. The construction at Göbekli Tepe took hundreds of workers to move those giant stones. It was a massive group effort for a temple. Sayburç took a different kind of skill. It required experts who knew how to carve directly into the bedrock to make a home. This shows a different way of thinking about space and building. The art style is also a massive change. At Göbekli Tepe, the animals are usually shown alone or in patterns that do not tell a clear story. At Sayburç, everything is part of a scene. The leopards and the humans are interacting. It looks like a moment from a legend or a real event that happened in the village. This kind of storytelling art requires a brain that can plan out a whole scene before starting to carve. You have to know where every figure goes and how they fit together. This is a leap in human thinking that was not supposed to happen for thousands of years. The technique used at Sayburç is called sunk relief. The artists cut away the background so the figures stand out. This is very hard to do on a vertical rock face. It means they had to remove a lot of stone, about 2 to 4 inches deep, across the whole 11.5-foot panel. This takes a lot of time and a very steady hand. The figures are rounded and look three-dimensional. They have musculature in proper proportions. One figure is even holding a rattle or a tool. which shows the artist understood how a hand holds an object. This is a giant step up from simple stick figures. It shows that the people of Sayburç were not just hunters. They were master artists who valued the human story. They chose to show themselves and their lives rather than just dangerous animals. This cultural choice sets them apart from the people at Göbekli Tepe. It proves that there was not just one way to be human in the ancient world. People were experimenting with different ways of living and expressing themselves. Some chose giant monuments, while others chose realistic stories in their own homes. This diversity is what most people do not realize when they think about the Stone Age. It was a time of great creativity and different ideas. The leopards at both sites show this perfectly. At Göbekli Tepe, there are scary symbols on a pillar. At Sayburç, they are part of a story where humans are the main characters. It is a shift in focus that changes how we see our ancestors. Seeing these two different styles so close together is like finding two different languages being spoken in the same small town. One group was focused on the spirit world and big scary animals. The other group was focused on themselves and their own stories. This means the region was a melting pot of ideas 11,000 years ago. For starters, the way the stone was carved at Sayburç is more like sculpture than just scratching a surface. The people had to have special tools made of even harder stone or early metals, though we usually think metal came much later. The skill needed to make a leopard look like it is ready to pounce is incredible. They carved the eyes, the teeth, and the muscles. At Göbekli Tepe, the animals are beautiful, but they feel like they belong to a different world. At Sayburç, they feel like they are part of our world. The buildings at Sayburç are rectangular, which is much better for living in than a circle. Rectangles let you add more rooms and use space better. This shows that the people were thinking about the future of their homes. They weren't just building for a ceremony, they were building for a life. The stone benches were not just for sitting, they were carved right into the foundation of the house. You couldn't move them. This is the ultimate sign of staying put. Hands down, this is the most clear evidence of a different culture. Göbekli Tepe has those giant pillars that stand in the middle of a room, taking up all the space. Sayburç has open rooms with benches along the walls. It is a much more social and human layout. It has been missing for years, but this key detail can shock the way we look at architecture history. We used to think humans learned to build square houses much later. But here they are, 9,000 years before the Common Era, living in square rooms with carved art. This proves that the revolution of the Neolithic was not just one event. It was a long period of trying new things. Some people liked the circles and the pillars. Others liked the squares and the benches. This tells us that there was tension and choice in the ancient world. People were deciding what kind of society they wanted to have. They were choosing their art, their homes, and their stories. The Sayburç relief is the most famous part, but the whole site is a treasure. It shows that the people were working with the rock, not just against it. They used the natural shape of the earth to help form their houses. This required a deep knowledge of the land and the materials. Basically, they were master engineers. The difference in labor is also a big deal. Göbekli Tepe needed a huge army of people to build. Sayburç could have been built by a single village. This suggests that while Göbekli Tepe was for everyone in the region, Sayburç was a private, special place for a specific group. They had their own secrets and their own ways. They didn't need 20-ton stones to show they were powerful. They had their art and their permanent homes. Wait until the actual evidence of their dinner and their tools is revealed. Living full-time in the past. The most important part of the Sayburç discovery is the evidence that people actually lived there all year long. For decades, the rule in archaeology was that Göbekli Tepe proved monuments came before houses. The idea was that people were still moving around as hunters but met up to build big temples. Then, supposedly, they decided to settle down because of the temples. Sayburç completely breaks this rule. The 25 excavations found real houses. These were not just temporary shelters. They have rectangular stone foundations and features inside like places for cooking and keeping food. These buildings were organized into a village layout. People didn't just build wherever they wanted. They had a plan for the community. There were paths between the houses and shared spaces for everyone. This shows a level of social rules that usually comes much later in history. Inside these houses, archaeologists found tools for daily life. There were grinding stones used for turning grain into flour. This is a huge clue. Grinding grain is hard work and requires heavy equipment that you cannot carry around if you are moving every week. It means these people were processing food in large amounts and staying in one place to do it. They also found storage pits. These are holes in the ground meant to keep food safe for a long time. They found charred seeds and grain fragments inside. This proves that the people of Sayburç were planning for the future. They were not just eating whatever they eliminated that day. They were gathering extra food and saving it for later. This kind of surplus management is the hallmark of a settled society. It is the very beginning of what we call a village. While Göbekli Tepe has no houses, no storage, and no hearths, Sayburç has all of them. This means that while some people were building giant stone circles, others were building the very first permanent homes. They were two different ways of living happening at the exact same time. This challenges the standard story of the Neolithic revolution. We used to think it was a slow, single line of progress from hunting to farming. Sayburç shows it was more like a tree with many branches. Some people settled down very early. They built houses and developed advanced art right away. The houses at Sayburç were integrated into the landscape. They used the natural rock as walls or floors. This shows a deep connection to the specific piece of land they lived on. They weren't just passing through. They were making a permanent mark on the world. The fact that they carved their most important stories into the rock of their own village shows how much they valued their home. This is a completely different vibe than the ritual center at Göbekli Tepe. It is the difference between a cathedral and a hometown. One is for special events, and the other is for every day. But at Sayburç, everyday life was full of incredible art and planning. This reveals that the people who started our modern way of life were much smarter and more organized than we ever gave them credit for. They were already living the dream of a settled community 9,000 years before the Common Era. What most people do not realize is that those grinding stones were probably used for wild grains at first. These people were not necessarily farmers yet, but they were acting like them. They were gathering large amounts of wild wheat and barley and turning it into something they could store and eat later. This is the missing link between hunting and farming. It proves that you can be settled without having fully domesticated crops. You just need a rich environment and the brainpower to manage it. The storage pits are especially interesting because they were found inside the houses. This suggests that each family or group kept their own food. At Göbekli Tepe, if there was food, it was likely shared during big festivals. At Sayburç, the food belonged to the home. This is the start of private property and family-based living. It is a huge shift in how humans interact with each other. For starters, having your own food supply means you can survive the winter without having to move. This leads to more babies being born and the population growing. Hands down, Sayburç is a better model for how the first cities actually started. It wasn't just a big temple. It was a lot of small homes working together. The hearths, or fireplaces, were found in the center of the rooms. This was the heart of the home. People gathered around the fire to cook, stay warm, and tell the stories seen on the relief panel. You can almost see them sitting on the carved stone benches, watching the firelight dance across the figures of the leopards and the humans on the wall. It would have been a very cozy and impressive place to live. Things get even crazier when you think about the trash they left behind. Archaeologists found thousands of pieces of flint and bone. These were the leftovers from making tools and eating meat. This trash is a goldmine for history. It tells us exactly what they ate and how they worked. They were eating gazelle, wild boar, and a lot of birds. They were master hunters, but they were hunters who came back to the same house every night. This contradicts the old idea that hunters are always on the move. Sayburç proves that if you have enough food in one place, you stay there. You build a wall. You carve a story. You make a life. So, here is the deal. The people of Sayburç were the first ones to realize that they didn't have to follow the herds forever. They could make the herds come to them, or they could store enough grain to wait. This realization is what changed the world forever. It started right here, in these rectangular stone rooms. I am not going to lie, it is amazing that these houses are still standing after 11,000 years. They were built to last, and they did. But the final mystery lies in the dates and what they say about our timeline. New origin story for us all. The final secret of Sayburç is that it forces us to change the timeline of human history. The level of skill shown in the relief carvings and the village layout is simply too advanced for the dates we have. Usually, realistic human art like this does not show up until 5,000 to 4,000 years before the Common Era. That is when the big civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt started. But Sayburç has it at 9,000 years before the Common Era. That is a 5,000-year gap. It is like finding a modern computer in the middle of the American Civil War. It just does not fit the timeline. This means that humans were capable of complex storytelling and realistic art much earlier than we thought. We have been underestimating our ancestors for a long time. The narrative art at Sayburç shows that they had complex myths and histories that they wanted to record. They weren't just surviving. They were thinking about their place in the world and their relationship with nature. They saw themselves as characters in a story. This kind of thinking is the foundation of everything that came later, including writing and government. The fact that Sayburç and GöbekliTepe are so different while being so close is the key detail. It proves that the ancient world was a mix of different cultures and ideas. There wasn't just one Neolithic revolution. There were many. Some people were building monuments, and some were building villages. Some were focused on animals, and some were focused on humans. This diversity is what made our ancestors so successful. They were trying every possible way to live and organize themselves. The Sayburç relief is a window into a world that we are only just beginning to understand. It shows a central figure flanked by dangerous leopards, which might represent a leader or a hero. This suggests that they already had stories about powerful people or gods who could control nature. This is a very advanced concept for people who were supposed to be primitive. The 25 analysis shows that these differences are systematic. They are not accidents. The people of Sayburç chose to be different. They chose to live in rectangular houses and carve realistic humans. This choice is what makes them so interesting. It shows that even 9,000 years ago, humans were making conscious decisions about their culture and their identity. The settlement evidence is undeniable. The grinding stones, the storage pits, and the hearths all point to a permanent way of life. This site is one of the earliest known villages in the world, and it is also one of the most artistic. It proves that we did not need farming to become artists. We were artists first. We were storytellers first. The settling down and the farming came as a result of our desire to stay in one place and build something meaningful. Sayburç is the proof that the human spirit and creativity were there from the very beginning. It is a story carved in stone that survived for 11,000 years to tell us that we have always been capable of great things. The secret of Sayburç is finally out, and it tells us that our history is much more exciting and complex than we ever imagined. The site stands as a reminder that every time we think we have figured out the past, something new comes out of the ground to shock us. Does the discovery of a permanent village like Sayburç prove that our entire timeline of human civilization is fundamentally broken? If humans were this advanced 11,000 years ago, what else have we missed? Leave a comment with your thoughts, like this video, and subscribe for more deep dives into ancient mysteries.